My name's Laurel Fisher, and I will be presenting on Sojourner Truth. I chose her because, well, first of all, I recognized her name. She's obviously a very known person in history. And before I started, I didn't know much about her except for the fact that she was an advocate for the abolition of slavery. I became more interested in her life and legacy the more I read about her advocacy for human rights and especially women's rights. In 1797, Sojourner Truth was born into slavery in Swartkill, New York. Her original name she was born with was Isabella Bumfree. She changed her name because she was inspired by her religion. Her slave owner died, and she was sold and separated from her family at just age 9. And she was sold as a flock of sheep for only $100. Then resold 2 more times over 2 years. So she was sold 3 times within 2 years. During this time, she learned to speak English, which was one of the upsides. Obviously, it was a tragic time, but a great skill she learned was learning to speak English. In 1815, Truth fell in love with Robert, a slave on a neighboring farm, and they had a daughter together. Robert's owner would not allow the relationship and forced her to marry an older slave named Thomas. And then Thomas and Truth had a son and 2 daughters together. In 1826, she escaped to freedom with her infant daughter Sophia after she found out her son Peter was illegally sold. She challenged it in court and won, which was a big accomplishment for African Americans and especially women. This was one of the first cases which Black women successfully challenged a white man in court, which is definitely one for the history books. In 1829, she started working as a housekeeper once she was freed, and in 1835, Truth brought a slander suit against the Folgers and won. The Folgers were a family that were allegedly associated with a cult, and they were pressing charges against her because they were attempting to associate Truth with poisoning Elijah Pearson, who was a person she worked for as a house cleaner, and just after she left, he was poisoned and then died. Later on, after rescuing her son, he began to work on a ship for 2 years, and then within those years, she received 2 letters from her son and then heard nothing at all. So that was the last time she heard from her son, was with those 2 letters. Losing a son would be a very difficult hardship to overcome, but Sojourner Truth manages to accomplish much more after this very hard tragedy, where typically mothers would find it difficult to move on and keep going. But she's a very strong woman, so she manages to push forward. On June 1st in 1843, this was when Truth legally changed her name and devoted her life to Methodism and abolishment of slavery. She also became an activist for women's rights. She then joined Northampton Association of Education and Industry, which was founded in order to reform women's rights and pacifisms, which is going towards that she's supporting women's rights and starting that movement. She continued to deliver speeches, and in 1865 she attempted to desegregate streetcars in Washington by riding a white streetcar. So you can imagine an African American woman in 1865 going in an all-white streetcar, walking in and sitting down and acting like it's fine. It took a lot of courage. I could never imagine doing that myself. I'd be so frightened. And so it took a lot of confidence and courage and really showed her passion for that. So within the next couple of years, she continued to deliver speeches and strive for what she believed in. And then about 20 years later, after attempting to desegregate streetcars, she died on November 26, 1883. But her legacy still lives on. She's remembered as one of the most foremost leaders of the abolition movement and an early advocate for women's rights, which is definitely something we all know to remember. And when you think of Sojourner Truth, the first thing that comes to your mind is human rights, women's rights, equal rights, and she definitely has a legacy that still lives on. So we're moving on to the Norton Anthology of African American Literature, and in this there's a section on Sojourner Truth. It's a couple pages, and I found some really enlightening quotes in there that I found that really related and lined up parallel to Sojourner's Truth values, and some really great examples. So the first one is I Am That I Am, which is found on page 176. And this quote is a response to someone asking her a question, really. Truth walked alone in New York at night after delivering an anti-slavery speech and lecture, and she was stopped by a policeman who demanded her say who she was, and she replied, I am that I am. This is originally a biblical reference, which is where I'd assume she would have gotten this quote, and that's why she used it. But then again, she also didn't know how to read, so she wouldn't have grabbed it directly from the Bible. She would have grabbed it from a church experience or maybe a reading she attended to. And this reference is from when God speaks to Moses in the Bible, and God tells Moses, I am that I am. God tells Moses this after Moses attempted to give the Lord's name. But I also believe this is saying, you know what, I am who I am. It's me standing here, and me stating my name, is that really going to change anything? This also shows that Truth has a very close relationship with God, and the action she's doing is in the light of God. I think that she, those were her original intentions, but her standing up to the police officer and saying, you know, I'm an African American woman, you can do what you want, but I am that I am who I am. And is that really going to change anything, stating what I'm saying? And he eventually walks away and leaves her alone, and she goes on her way with her cane. She's a little old woman, and she, I think, put out a statement that we are who we are. Are you making us state what we are or who we are going to change anything? You can see me, you can see what I'm doing nothing wrong. So I believe that she did have intentions to refer to the biblical reference, but I think it means a little bit more. Another quote from the Norton Anthology. So two of my sources that I took most of my information from was the biography.com, was the section on Sojourner Truth, and the Norton Anthology of African American Literature by Henry Gates and Valerie Smith. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Thanks.